Welcome to VyCast, where we bring a blend of knowledge, expertise, and fun to the world of finance. Stay tuned for our exciting episode packed with insights and practical tips that will help you achieve your financial goals.
Welcome to VyCast, the podcast from VyStar Credit Union, where we do good and help you bank better. Today is a special episode. We're on location at WKMG News 6 in Orlando, wrapping up the VyStar Debt Payoff 90-Day Challenge. Now, over the past few months, we have been in communities across the VyStar footprint. We kicked off the challenge in Jacksonville, held a debt workshop in Atlanta, and now we're in Orlando to share these incredible results of the challenge. Now, during the Debt Payoff Challenge, participants received regular emails showing them how to use VyStar's tools and resources to better understand their finances, build a plan, and take meaningful action. They also found support through the VyStar social media community group. This online community shared personal stories of their challenges and wins, helping turn what felt overwhelming into goals that felt possible. All of that resulted in more than 40,000 people paying down millions of dollars in debt and building momentum toward long-term financial stability. But as we celebrate that success, it also raises a bigger question. Why are so many people struggling in the first place? Well, that's where this challenge connects to something deeper. The Debt Payoff Challenge was born from data revealed in a 2026 study, The State of Financial Stability in the Southeast, presented by VyStar and TransUnion. So today, we're going to unpack both sides of that story, the progress we've seen through the challenge and what the data tells us about where we go from here. Well, I'm joined by Karzan, Chief Marketing Officer at VyStar Credit Union, and Daniel Venegas, Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Heart of Florida United Way in Orlando. Thank you both so much for being here.
So good to be here.
All right, well, let's jump in. Dana, let's start with you because this challenge was designed as a response to what was seen in the study.
You're exactly right, Charlene. This challenge didn't happen by accident. What we saw in the study is that a lot of people are working incredibly hard, but they're still feeling overwhelmed. In fact, the majority, 40%, said that finances have become their top stressor. That's more than jobs, health, family. And what's often driving that stress is debt. And it's really debt that's not happening because a big event happened, but it's debt that's really, growing over time. And it's like the very small decisions that they make every single day really starts to add up. Mm-hmm. And what we're also seeing is that there's often a disconnect. People don't really realize when debt has crossed that magical line between manageable to unmanageable. And by the time that it's really becoming overwhelming, we're hearing from people that it's usually been building up for really a long time. In Orlando, while it's a little bit less of immediate impact, for example, about 46% in people in Orlando and those in the study said that they were not able to keep up with bills, compared to over 51% in the greater Southeast that say they can't keep up with bills.
So it trends a little bit better.
Yeah, it trends a little bit better, but that really doesn't really tell the whole story. Mm-hmm. We're actually not seeing that people in Orlando are more financially comfortable. We're just seeing that they're starting to feel overwhelmed, and things like housing and transportation are really starting to increase their level of concerns. So on the surface, things can look a little bit more stable, but when you look a little bit deeper, people are still really stressed.
Yeah, when you have high housing costs and transportation costs, and you're just making your bills, it's hard to save.
Exactly.
And I can see why that would be stressful for them.
Exactly. And so for those reasons is really why we created the Debt Payoff Challenge. It's really about helping people recognize those patterns earlier and hopefully getting them to some practical, judgment-free tools for them to start to take control and to move forward with confidence.
Yeah, I know the before they started even getting the emails, when they very first signed on, they took a quiz, like a very brief quiz that kind of gave them a little self-assessment of what their needs were when it came to savings or budgeting or debt payoff. So that does give you a little bit of a reality check. And then when you got the emails, I know that the participants then, you know, those things that they needed help with, they got the information of how they could address those issues. And I mentioned at the beginning that 40,000 people participated in the challenge. And when they used the tools and the resources, they ended up collectively paying down more than $28 million in debt. And this is just in 90 days that they were able to accomplish this. Did you expect to see this level of participation and this level of success?
No, it was amazing. You know, we really, really hoped we would have people reach out and participate and start looking at the tools. But to see such an overwhelming response really told us that, you know, it's really people across Jacksonville, Atlanta, and Orlando are really looking for this kind of guidance. Financial stability is a journey. And VyStar's role is really to help people move from feeling stuck and not knowing where to start to really taking those first small steps and feeling supported in the journey. So not only did we see these great numbers across all three of these big markets, here in Orlando, we saw participants pay down an average of more than $2,000 each in 90 days.
That's like a credit card bill right there.
It's incredible. And, you know, this adds up to over $4 million overall in this area. So it was one of the strongest outcomes we saw across all of our markets. You know, the other thing is we also had the opportunity for people that joined the challenge and started working on their debt that they could be randomly selected to win $5,000. And so the exciting part was we had a winner come from Orlando, and as we understand, that winner is really moving forward. So she felt much less overwhelmed by debt and is going to take that $5,000, put it into savings, and start on her journey to getting closer to buying a home, which is really an exciting dream that many people have. And so we're really excited that not only did she learn about paying down debt, getting into that manageable debt category, but starting to really look forward to those big opportunities in life when you have the opportunity to put money against savings.
Daniel, let's bring you into this conversation now too. Those results, as you know, we mentioned were pretty impressive, but also they're highlighting something important, right? A lot of people are still working hard just to keep up, especially in a growing market like Orlando, where the cost of living has started to outpace the national average. We talked about how people were spending so much on housing. That pressure is showing up in other areas. In fact, the study showed across the Southeast that we're seeing more financial hardship in the Southeast than we are nationally. So let me ask you, the study also included data from the United Way's ALICE report. And people may have been starting to hear about the ALICE report because it's kind of really making headlines across the country. Can you walk us through what ALICE means and why that perspective was so important that VyStar put it in their study?
Yeah, thank you for that question. You know, I'll start by saying everybody knows Alice. Alice is your cashier at a Publix, is the person making your Starbucks coffee order, is the teacher, the police officer. So what that is Alice stands for asset limited, income constrained, and employed. And it's very important that I emphasize employed, because what that really means is that these are individuals and families who are working, but they are maybe not making ends meet. So their financial cushion is not there. They don't have the savings or the assets to fall back. And if something unexpected happens, their incomes often are stretched.
Unexpected is like your car breaks down, your child gets sick. I mean, things that happen every day.
Correct. And you're making trade-offs, right? You are choosing between, do I maybe pay my rent late because I have to take care of my child? Do I stay home because my child is sick? So, and sometimes some of those people don't have PTO or they don't have health insurance because they don't work a traditional job that offers those options. But once again, I go back to, we got to emphasize, they are employed. And they're working
sometimes more than one job.
Correct. They're relying on the gig economy that we've seen. So we've seen a lot of them are Uber drivers or your Lyft, and they're just maybe working that second job to make that extra cash to be able to afford some of those tiny things that are not luxuries, right? Like maybe paying for your groceries, or once again, we go back to the emergency, but like those $300 could really set a family back if your car breaks down. And in many places where a car is a necessity,
like Orlando, in Jacksonville and in Atlanta as well. I mean, Atlanta has some public transportation, but really very limited in Jacksonville and Orlando.
Right, and so we are really seeing that that's kind of what Alice is. It encapsulates a hardworking group of people and households. And in the state of Florida, we are seeing that Alice households are 47%. Roughly across the state.
That's almost half of households in Orlando are Alice households.
Correct.
That's a huge number. And you mentioned just trying to cover the basics, groceries, gas, all of that has gone up right now. So they really are challenged right now.
Yeah, so we're seeing those trade-offs consistently. So I go back to, it really is a conversation about, like, these are people that are working every day. They're showing up. And they're people that we know, we cross, right? Like, it could be your teacher, your kid's teacher. It could be someone you know. It could be a family member. It could be your coworker. These are people that are with us in our community. They're working hard, and they're just one bad thing away from having some sort of financial burden placed upon them, and they're having to figure it out. And so I think it's important that that's Alice. Alice is someone you know very closely, but you just not maybe aware that they are Alice.
And that's why the stress level is so high, 40%. Danny, you mentioned it's higher than their health, it's higher than job, it's higher than family stress. We all know families can be stressful at times, and that's why it's so stressful, and that's why we're talking about capacity. So, Danny, can you help connect the dots between the Alice data and then what the study revealed about that financial stress and debt?
That's a great question, because the Alice data really helped reinforce what we're already seeing in our study. When you look at both together, there's a consistent story. We have many individuals and families who are working. They're earning income, as Daniel was saying, but they're still struggling to stay ahead. And in our study, we saw that finances have become that top stressor, and a big part of that is the debt that builds up over time. And what Alice shows us, the Alice data shows us, is why in a place like Orlando, where so much of the economy is really driven by service, tourism, as Daniel said, even small changes in income or cost of living or these unexpected emergencies that may come up can really have a big impact.
Because then when that credit card debt keeps growing and growing, that's continuing to add stress.
And then, again, not making judgments about was that a good decision or a bad decision. It was a decision that's made. So now let's not try to avoid that or feel shameful about that, but actually let's look and see how we can address it and start making small steps that can start to bring yourself back into that manageable category. And looking at all of those opportunities, and that's what we really try to do at VyStar Credit Union, is start you on those small steps, but also start to look at ways that maybe there's other vehicles of loans or credit that can be a little bit smaller interest rates and more manageable payments that can get you back into that manageable category. So there's lots of different steps you can take to help you kind of get back on track.
Right. And it's not just about the data, right? It's about really understanding what people are experiencing in real life and then providing those tools, as you mentioned, and the support to help them regain that confidence, because so many people just feel so overwhelmed. They feel alone. They don't want to talk about their debt, and then it just ends up getting worse. and then they go to predatory lending, then they end up doing a lot of the buy now, pay later, and then next thing you know, they've got 6, 7 really loans out there to buy the basic stuff. So Daniel, we've talked about how the Debt Payoff Challenge, Dana provided some information about, the tools and the resources that credit unions like VyStar offer. So I want you to share a little bit how the Heart of Florida United Way is supporting those families who are facing those same kinds of challenges. Like what services? Because one of the big things that VyStar does is really align themselves with community partners, realizing that we can't be all things to all people, and really reaching out to our partners like you and saying, hey, how do we lift up our community together? How do we join forces? Because when we help one person, we're helping a family, we're helping a neighborhood, we're helping a community.
Yeah, I mean, I think at Heart of Florida United Way, we have a saying is that we're lighting the way. And having this conversation is part of lighting the way. And what we do is we try to meet people where they are and giving them practical support that they can use right away. One example is our Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, or VITA, which offers free tax preparation. And these are folks that are trained by the IRS, and it can save families hundreds of dollars. And we are a trusted community partner. We've been in the community for 85 years. So you know that when you're coming to us, you're coming and we're help make sure that you are getting important refunds like the Earned Income Tax Credit that for a lot of households that we just talked about could be hundreds of dollars that go straight back into everyday needs like rent, groceries, or car repairs. We also have the 211 helpline, which is available 24/7, 365, and it connects people to the services right here in our community. Whether it's housing, food, financial assistance, we can connect you. We are that resource you can call at any time. And when we talk about feeling overwhelmed, one thing that Heart of Florida United Way, we think about lighting the way is not just those resources, but it's really about taking care of the entire person. So we work to address mental health through our 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, which is a 24/7 free line that people can call and they can talk to our operators and be able to get assistance. And not only do we talk to you during the time of crisis, but we'll also connect you to the resources that are available so that maybe if you're calling because you're feeling overwhelmed because of all the stress financially, we can really come to you and say like, hey, how else can we help you? What else do you need so that you feel like you come out of those conversations in a better place?
And I'm so glad you mentioned the mental health factor, because Dana, when we did the kickoff for the study and the challenge in Jacksonville, we had a kind of a news conference, but also a panel. And on that panel was a gentleman who represented a veterans group. And he alluded to that some veteran suicides can be attributed to, they come out of the military, they don't have that same financial stability structure, and they find themselves overwhelmed. They find themselves feeling like a failure because before they were a provider and now they're struggling financially. Some of them end up homeless. So I'm so glad that you connected that mental health issue. I think it's so important that we have that conversation because debt is something that so many people are dealing with, but people don't want to talk about openly. And I think, Dana, we can attribute that to some of that good debt, bad debt, right? Self-inflicted wounds, you made bad decisions, right? That shame that they feel. And one of the things that you also mentioned about the Debt Payoff Challenge was this judgment-free. And I think so much of this was online that people could do it in the privacy of their home, right? They didn't have to do it in front of people for those folks who didn't want to share the information that they had about how they had gotten behind. So I want to bring another voice into the conversation. This is Kara. She is a challenge participant who admits she was too afraid to ask for help with her debt before she joined. So let's take a listen.
So I actually got an email from VyStar, and when I opened it, I realized you guys had a whole financial quiz I could take to help me realize where my struggles with debt come from, my money management, and it just helped me start this journey so I could feel more comfortable. I'm so glad you guys are doing this so you can motivate other people who are scared like me to even talk about their debt. It's that elephant in the room that we don't like discussing because we feel like we're alone. I would like to be able to buy my first home in the future, and I know until I get my credit score up and I get my debt under control, that wouldn't be possible. But with VyStar, I know it's in my future.
And Dana, you hear her say it's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about. So when you hear stories like Kara's, and how is VyStar and the study kind of changing that conversation from, going from people feeling judged to people feeling supported in this effort? Kara's
story really says it all. She's not alone. And for a long time, the conversation around debt has been, again, these terms of good versus bad. Really makes people feel like they've done something wrong instead of really recognizing life circumstances that are behind it, right? Daniel talked about it. These are, for many people, very hardworking people doing all the things that we say are the right things to do, getting a job, working hard, taking care of their family. But the reality is that even doing all of those right things, you can find yourself in a situation where you do have to get into debt and it becomes unmanageable. So, again, taking that judgment out and really helping people come to grips with what it is, and then really looking at the tools and guidance and the really support to help make very small, easy steps forward that start to add up over time.
And Daniel, as we wrap up, let's talk a little bit about how this data can help shape policy and drive real change, because you are really talking to our government leaders about what people need and how the government can address them.
Yeah, I think when you look at the ALICE data, the beauty of the ALICE data is that it's centralized and localized to talk about people's individual communities. And so when you look at it, you can look at this data and say, like, here's where the ALICE community is at. And you can use it to inform elected officials. And I see it in Tallahassee all the time, where you have conversations and you tell them, like, here's what we're seeing, right? And sometimes it's not necessarily about doing things at a big scale, but it's really coming to the community and addressing those issues directly. And I think that's what the beauty of the ALICE data does, because it really captures those people that are working. They are working. I can't emphasize that more, but like, they are working, and sometimes multiple jobs.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're just dealing with a lot of the things that we just talked about, but the check is just not stretching far enough, right? And so how we adjust that, and sometimes we can look at it from the simple perspective of, like, making more money could be good, or getting a raise. But what does that mean for someone like an ALICE household that depends on some of the government help that they receive, right? Like $1 or maybe a slight increase could mean that you lose your child care that the government is providing you, right? And so it's not, that data tells that story, and it really helps inform elected officials. The data that VyStar put together is part of that, right? It's like we're telling this story from different lenses to make sure that we're educating so that the decision makers can have an educated decision when it comes to take action.
Well, and as we wrap up, I just want to remind our audience that there is help, 211.
Correct, 211, 24/7, 365. If you're feeling overwhelmed, 988 24/7 365. Our 211 resource has over 3,000 resources that they can be connected to. You're going to be connected to the closest resource available to you, not only ours but other community partners as well.
Right.
And I say, like, we've been in the community through World War II, a pandemic, economic shutdowns.
You're not going anywhere.
We are not going anywhere.
And Dane, even though the challenge is over, people can still go to VyStarCU.org and find all kinds of financial resources.
Yes. Again, 24/7. We've got those available, judgment-free or online. And then, of course, visit us at any of our branches. We have a whole team of people ready and willing to help you get started on whatever you need personally to get back to the manageable side of debt.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for joining us on this special on-location episode of VyCast in the WKMG News 6 studios in Orlando. Please make sure to subscribe to VyCast wherever you get your podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can also follow us on Facebook at VyStar CU, Instagram and YouTube at VyStar Credit Union. And I want to remind everybody as well to go to that community page, that group page on VyStar on Facebook to get a ton of support. You'll absolutely love it. And let us know your thoughts on whatever topic you'd like us to cover. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you next time.